You're finally here. You were expecting me?
Well, you Greymanes are a hard lot to kill, clawing your way back from death's door over and over. How'd you do it? Let's find out, shall we?
Crimson Desert is one of the most confusing games I've played in years. One moment it feels like the next evolution of open world RPGs, the next it feels like a broken MMO trapped inside a single player game. Some players are calling it a masterpiece worthy of standing beside games like The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and Elden Ring. Others think it's a repetitive, unfinished mess that isn't even worth your time. And honestly, after spending more than 120 hours exploring its world, fighting its bosses, testing its mechanics, and digging through everything the game has to offer, I think both sides are right. So today, instead of blindly praising the game or hating on it, I want to break down Crimson Desert objectively and review it for what it actually is. A deeply flawed game that somehow became one of the most immersive open world experiences I've had in years. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Only Thing Gaming channel. One of the most important things to understand about Crimson Desert is that it didn't originally start as a single-player RPG. The game was first developed as an MMO, but somewhere during development, Pearl Abyss changed direction and transformed it into a single-player open-world action-adventure. And honestly, you can feel that transition everywhere. On one hand, this decision probably helped the game reach a much larger audience. But on the other hand, some systems still feel awkward, clunky, or unfinished, almost like remnants from a completely different game. That said, I'm reviewing Crimson Desert for what it is now, not for what it originally tried to be. Still, I have to mention that MMO foundation because it heavily affected the narrative, the character writing, and even parts of the world design, especially when it comes to pacing and storytelling. The story is easily the weakest part of Crimson Desert, not because the world itself is bad. Actually, the setting is one of the game's strongest qualities, but because the narrative feels overly stretched, cliché, and poorly paced. You play as Cliff, leader of the Greymanes, who's trying to reunite his scattered faction after they were ambushed by the Black Bears, while also preparing the world of Pyrewell for a greater threat that could destroy everything. And honestly, on paper, that sounds great. The game clearly takes inspiration from Game of Thrones, with noble houses, political conflicts, dragons, knights, betrayal, magic, and medieval warfare. If you love that kind of fantasy setting, there's a very high chance you'll enjoy the world itself. But the problem isn't the setting. The problem is how the story is told. The pacing is painfully slow. The dialogue often feels unnatural, and many characters exist purely as filler. Even Damian and Unka, characters that are supposed to feel important, end up feeling more like playable side characters rather than actual protagonists. At the end of the day, this is Cliff's story, and even Cliff himself isn't particularly deep. He mostly plays the role of the wise, honorable hero who helps everyone no matter what. Which sounds fine until you realize most main quests feel like glorified fetch quests. The game has 12 chapters plus a prologue, and honestly, I think the story could have been told in half the time. Some chapters feel completely disconnected from the main narrative, and many missions follow the exact same formula. You follow someone, something goes wrong, a fight starts over and over again. It reminded me a lot of some mission structures from Red Dead Redemption 2, except without the same level of character writing to support it. The dialogue also feels clunky, and NPCs take annoying and weird pauses between their lines.
Didn't know it spun so finely. On second thought, I can't part with it after all. But I've got other wares I'll sell you at a good price.
But to be fair, not everything about the story is bad. There are moments where Crimson Desert genuinely shines. One of my favorite parts was the Chapter 3 encounter with the Devil of the Reed Fields. This character is supposedly the abandoned son of a noble family, rejected because of his illness. Everything about this sequence was fantastic, from the atmosphere of the village of the sick to the build-up leading into the boss fight itself. Tracking him through enemy territory while the tension slowly builds was one of the few moments where the game truly felt special narratively. And strangely enough, a lot of Crimson Desert's best storytelling is hidden in optional content, side quests, lore documents, and Visioni memories. Which honestly made me wonder, why is the game hiding its best writing in side content while the main story sends me to find someone's missing sheep? The Visioni system itself is actually pretty interesting. You wear a special helm that allows you to witness fragments of memories from the past, adding more lore and context to the world. Some memories are pointless filler, sure, but others are genuinely fascinating. I'd honestly say Chapter 3 is the point where you decide whether Crimson Desert is for you or not, because if the game hasn't hooked you by then, it probably never will. The story really starts gaining momentum around Chapter 6 and 7, and by that point, you've probably already spent 40 to 50 hours playing. And having to spend that much time to start enjoying a game is a lot to ask. One of the later highlights for me was the encounter where Cliff gets dragged out of the memory world by Caliburn. The entire scene felt heavily inspired by Game of Thrones, because a certain character can see another certain character in the show when he is walking through memories. I won't spoil exactly what I mean, but if you've watched the show, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. Overall, though, the narrative is the one area where I genuinely think Crimson Desert falls apart. If you're planning to play this game mainly for the story, I honestly wouldn't recommend it. But thankfully, almost everything outside the narrative is significantly stronger. So before we move on, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. Unlike the story, gameplay is where Crimson Desert absolutely shines. This is the part of the game that kept me playing for more than 120 hours. Now, technically, the game has multiple playable characters, but since I spent almost all my time using Cliff, most of this review will focus on him. The first thing you notice about Crimson Desert is that it doesn't really invent new mechanics. Instead, it borrows ideas from almost every major open world game you can think of. You can clearly see inspirations from Assassin's Creed in the climbing system, The Legend of Zelda in traversal and exploration, Batman Arkham Knight in the gliding mechanics, Red Dead Redemption 2 in the honor system, Dark Souls and Elden Ring in the boss fights and combat philosophy, and of course, The Witcher 3 inspired a lot of quests and magic skills in the game. But what makes Crimson Desert special is how naturally it combines all those ideas together. Traversal is incredibly fun. Climbing mountains, gliding across valleys, flying through the world, movement alone makes exploration enjoyable. And more importantly, the game respects player creativity. Crimson Desert doesn't constantly hold your hand or force you into one specific solution. Yes, some of the mechanics feel clunky, but the game really allows you to try out most of the things you can in your own way. Sometimes when I solve a puzzle or get through a situation, I ask myself, was this intended to be done this way or did I just improvise? For example, during bounty missions, the game provides high profile and low profile. Switching to low profile can be done by crouching, so when I needed to tackle a bounty target without killing him, I had to crouch first to then be able to capture him alive. In another mission, I used the Helm of Knowledge to bypass an investigation entirely instead of following the intended process. And apparently this wasn't even a glitch. The game simply allows it. And also, to tell you the truth, this wasn't my discovery. I just saw this online, but I was impressed to see the game allowing it. Honestly, this feeling has been lost in almost all of the modern games. And it was nice to see a game just respect your brain basically and allow you to experiment with those situations. That's one of the bigger reasons the gameplay feels so refreshing despite borrowing so many mechanics from other games. Combat is another huge highlight. It's not perfect, enemy variety is somewhat limited, but the sheer number of abilities, weapons, skills, magic types, and combat combinations makes fights consistently entertaining. Some bosses even force you to think differently instead of simply spamming attacks. Using the Axiom Force to pull enemies or open the boss defense made encounters feel far more dynamic than I expected. Weapons can be upgraded using materials or duplicate gear, which actually gives value to common loot drops instead of making them useless junk. Materials themselves are gathered directly from the environment, caves, forests, and mountainsides, using tools like pickaxes and logging axes. Contribution points earned from side quests can also unlock faction gear and rare equipment. Some armor sets act as disguises, others trigger hostile reactions from NPCs. For example, wearing a Hernand Castle guard outfit inside the castle causes guards to attack you because they recognize you as an imposter. That kind of immersive interaction adds a lot to the role playing aspect of the game, but committing crimes costs you contribution points and makes you want it unless you pay the bounty on your head. One detail I really liked is how gear actually affects gameplay beyond stats. An example on this was when I extracted this gear from this legendary sword and used this skill with my glaive and turned it into a beam shooting weapon. Fighting normal enemies is mostly just a mashing game, unless you want to string together different attacks and grabs. Which brings us to the different skills you can unlock through the skill tree. Now, unlocking skills by buying them using Abyss artifacts, aka skill points, is a traditional mechanic in this kind of games. But Crimson Desert takes learning skills a step further. You can actually learn skills and techniques simply by observing enemies or NPCs using them in the open world. And honestly, that's one of the coolest progression systems I've seen in years. Other than skills, gear, and armor, the game offers more ways to upgrade and expand in your characters. The most important things to look out for and upgrade as soon as you can are the horse bond level and the number of spaces you have with your infantry. Bonding with your horse unlocks more actions with your horse, and expanding your infantry allows you to carry up to 240 items and can be done by buying bags or completing side quests. By the time you max out your infantry, the sort and group options will help you manage and organize your items. Also, the game introduced an honor system. You can greet people and pet animals to build trust with them. This allows you to unlock secret items in the shops or take in pets like dogs to help you by grabbing loot from the enemies, which really saves you time and effort. The game also incorporates a lot of other systems that you don't really have to engage with, but you can if you want to. One of those systems is the cooking. Basically, you obtain recipes and put those ingredients together to create healing items that grant you more health, more buffs, and sometimes stamina or spirit as well. Another system that you can ignore, but I won't advise you to, is the camp system in Howling Hill. It provides a storage box where you can store your items for later, and once it's expanded, it becomes your one time stop for everything. You can sell, donate, upgrade, cook, and sleep in it. Not to mention, you can also send comrades to farm different materials for you and your camp, or use their help to free outposts or complete quests by constructing buildings or bridges. You also get a house that you can decorate, although it's not that useful. You'd be better off selling those items. You can even sell stolen wagons or livestock in the camp to gain extra cash. Money in this game is easy to get. You can sell spiders, cockroaches, posters, and more useless stuff that no one would actually pay for outside this game. The puzzles of the game are really unique. They challenge you to explore and figure them out without giving any hints, but sometimes grabbing some objects can be a bit tricky and annoying. The game's physics don't exactly help in some situations, which creates frustration. You can also engage in minigames and challenges like poker, hand wrestling, or fights. Challenges are a bit weird because they require you to find an Abyss artifact before actually being able to complete the challenge. Archery contests were the hardest for me. I had to switch to mouse and keyboard and adjust sensitivity settings to complete them because opponents have unreal precision and speed. Despite Cliff being the main character, Damian and Unka can be summoned to help or get injured. You can even switch characters similar to GTA V. The weakest mechanic in the game has to be stealth. I would completely understand any opinion that doesn't even acknowledge stealth in Crimson Desert because the game is not built for stealth. And don't get me wrong, it's a good thing. Enemies detect you as soon as they see or hear you, which to be honest is how it should be. One of the worst things you will deal with when you play Crimson Desert is the controls. Now, controls are not bad, and after playing the game for a while, they get even better. But the game implements a weird controlling scheme. Some actions require you to press two buttons at the same time, and some actions are weirdly mapped. But the biggest issue in this regard is that the game feels unresponsive. Sometimes it delays or doesn't respond to the input, and this mostly happens with actions that require you to hold the button or actions that require more than one button at the same time. The thing that made this game really stand out is the passion that the developers have shown for this game. Since the game dropped back in March, Pearl Abyss have been updating, patching, and adding new features to address the issues and listen to what players want. They've added new settings, new difficulties, more animations, more content, and fixed a lot of the game's issues. I finished the game on patch 1.02, and if you're playing sometime in the future, maybe some issues I spoke or will speak about are not there anymore. Still, despite those flaws, gameplay remains the strongest part of Crimson Desert by far. There are so many mechanics layered into the game that even after 100 hours, I was still discovering new features by accident. At one point, I discovered that you could toggle cloak hoods individually, and somehow I didn't discover that until over 100 hours into the game. That perfectly summarizes Crimson Desert: messy, overwhelming, sometimes frustrating, but constantly surprising. The world of Crimson Desert feels like a strange mix between medieval fantasy and science fiction. One moment you're exploring villages that look straight out of The Witcher 3, the next moment you're dealing with laser weapons, ancient machinery, or flying through the abyss. And somehow, it works. The world itself is massive. Honestly, maybe too massive. Not only do you have the main continent of Pywell, but there's also the abyss, essentially a second world suspended in the sky. The scale is genuinely insane. Now, whether that's a good thing depends entirely on your preference. Personally, I think the map is oversized. Yes, exploration is fun. Yes, the game allows you to reach almost every location you can see, but sometimes the world feels unnecessarily stretched. Still, the environmental variety is incredible. You have green valleys, snowy mountains, deserts, ruined castles, forests, and even Japanese-inspired villages. The city of Hernand instantly reminded me of Novigrad from The Witcher 3. Exploration is supported by systems like the Binding Light, which helps you locate artifacts and important points of interest, while bell towers clear sections of the map similar to viewpoints in Assassin's Creed. But unlike games such as Red Dead Redemption 2, the NPCs don't feel particularly alive. They exist more as background decoration than believable inhabitants of the world. You can literally carry a bounty target through the middle of a city and most NPCs won't even react. I even watched NPCs cutting trees for several minutes, except the trees never actually fall. So visually, the world is beautiful. Systematically, though, it doesn't always feel dynamic. Oh my god, you just saw how big the open world is. The content of the game spans through almost every piece of the map. There are main quests, side quests, challenges, hidden caves, collectibles, and puzzles to find in almost every corner. And thankfully, there's a decent variety too. One mission might have you herding cattle across a valley, while another sends you flying through the sky in a balloon. Some side quests even include fully voiced storylines and unique cutscenes. Unfortunately, though, a huge portion of side content still falls into generic MMO-style fetch quest territory, and once you fully upgrade your infantry, many of those quests simply stop being worth doing. Investigation quests were especially disappointing for me. The game marks clues directly on your map and doesn't even allow incorrect dialogue choices, which completely removes the feeling of actual investigation. Quests are not the only form of content in the game. Different mounts, legendary animals, unique puzzles are also present. The journal system is excellent, keeping track of quests, challenges, collectibles, and progression in one place makes the game much easier to manage, especially for completionists. And speaking of completionists, I wanted to name this section Bugs and Glitches, but some people might not watch the whole thing and get the wrong idea. Because if you are planning to fully complete Crimson Desert or go for 100% completion, prepare yourself mentally. The game has a lot of technical issues. The side quest system in this game is not typical. Some side quests can be activated by interacting with notice boards. Some side quests only activate randomly, so you'll have to keep revisiting NPCs repeatedly to get all of the commission quests. And then there are the bugs. Some are harmless, others can completely block progression. Here are a few examples. Memory fragments sometimes don't get loaded. I found a workaround by using the binding light on the sword. Enemies take damage from weird sources like hitting the ground. This makes challenges like defeating enemies with a shield harder to complete because they take damage from the shield but they die when they hit the ground, so it doesn't count. I also encountered this glitch when I was trying to normally read a letter. The NPCs restart their slow and uninteresting dialogue if you move. Activities like stargazing are frustrating because it requires you to stand at an exact location and look at a very exact corner to get the constellation to work. Also, some physical objects don't react as they should, which creates annoying situations like this one right here. The idea is that I have to use the palm strike ability to get to the other side of this wall, but as you can see from the footage, this was harder said than done. I had to fly and get to the other side using a cheesy way, and I got out using fast travel after I got the loot from inside. One of the weirder encounters I dealt with but unfortunately didn't record was this device in the abyss. The idea is that you have to destroy it to get a battery that you can use to progress. I destroyed it, but I fell when I was trying to move the battery, and when I fast traveled back to the abyss, both the device and the battery despawned, meaning the puzzle became impossible to complete without reloading an older save. Not to mention some annoying minigames. I put those problems in a section alone because I wanted to treat the game fairly. Maybe you're watching this in a future where patches and updates solve those problems. If that's the case, you can ignore those. And yes, not everyone is a completionist, but you can encounter those issues regardless. So I'd recommend you to keep creating manual saves at different points of the game and have patience, because it won't be easy to follow or create a guide for this game. Because there's a lot to do, and quest structure in this game is not very similar to other games. Before starting with this, I'd like to remind you that I finished the game on patch 1.02. Yes, it's old by now, but I've been working on this video for about a month now. The game's visuals are really stunning. Even on a mid-range PC with settings nowhere near ultra, the game constantly looked impressive. From the water physics, to those green meadows, to the tracks your horse leaves on the snow, to the yellow reed fields, to the details of the characters and armor sets, at times, the game genuinely looks like a moving oil painting. Character models are also incredibly detailed, especially Damian. She was beautifully detailed, and yes, she is beautiful. The game even includes small quality of life details I appreciated, like the ability to hide or show the character's headgear in the options. You can even choose to hide it only during cutscenes. The game even included small technical mechanics, if I may call them. One of those is that if you fast travel while standing on a fast travel point, you'll skip the walking scene. And speaking of fast traveling, it's extremely quick too, usually under 10 seconds.
Challenge yourself.
That said, visuals can occasionally break down in darker areas where there is no light source. You either can't see what you're doing when you try to solve a puzzle, or you can see an ugly scene like this one. With all of that said, let's take a look at the graphics settings, performance, and PC specs. Just remember, if you're not interested, you can skip to those timestamps. As you just saw, the game was surprisingly optimized for me. Maintaining about 80 to 90 FPS most of the time was easy using FSR3 FrameGen. Without frame generation, performance drops much lower, around the 40 FPS range. But since FSR works on both AMD and Nvidia GPUs, there's really no reason not to use it. Or if you have an Nvidia GPU, maybe use DLSS to potentially get better results. But I didn't try it, so I won't speak for it. Crimson Desert proves that overbalanced mechanics are not actually needed for a game to achieve success. If the players found the game fun, they'll find a way to work around most of its shortcomings. This is one of the hardest games I've ever reviewed, because this game constantly fights against itself. It has some genuinely outdated design choices, weak storytelling, frustrating controls, and noticeable technical issues. But at the same time, it also delivers one of the most immersive and mechanically rich open world experiences I've played in years. As a critic, I can't honestly call this game a masterpiece. That would be unfair to games like The Witcher 3, Elden Ring, or Red Dead Redemption 2. But as a player, I haven't played a game like this since Elden Ring. I spent about 120 hours in the game and I genuinely loved my time with it. I was taking notes, screenshots, maps, anything I can see online. It was really an enjoyable experience, so my recommendation is simple. If you love open world games, exploration, experimentation, and medieval fantasy settings, don't miss Crimson Desert. But if you mainly care about storytelling or you don't have the time for a massive 100 plus hour experience, this probably isn't the game for you. And if you're still unsure, wait for a sale. Either way, this has been one of the biggest and most difficult reviews I've ever worked on. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know your thoughts about the game in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.